Welcome back to Wealth Waves. You know, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about personal finance and all the strategies for building wealth. But I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the numbers, and we forget about the psychology behind money, how our emotions and beliefs really shape our financial decisions. So today we're doing a deep dive into that fascinating world of the psychology of money. And we're going to be drawing insights from a couple of really interesting sources. First up, we have Morgan Housel's fantastic book, The Psychology of Money, which is honestly a must-read for anyone who wants to, I don't know, just have a healthier relationship with money. And then we're going to be looking at Housel's conversation with Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO podcast, where they go even deeper into some of these ideas.
Yeah, I think one of the most thought-provoking things Housel talks about is how we often confuse being rich with being wealthy.
Right, it's like that classic saying, more money, more problems. It's easy to get caught up in that whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality, where you're constantly striving for more stuff, more status, more whatever. But that doesn't necessarily translate into true wealth.
Exactly what Housel argues is that true wealth is about having that financial freedom and independence. It's about having that cushion that allows you to make choices without being constantly worried about money.
It reminds me of that quote by Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right-hand man. He said, "I never wanted to get rich. I just wanted to get independent." And I think that really captures the essence of what Housel's talking about.
Absolutely. It's about having that autonomy to shape your life on your own terms, to pursue the things that are truly important to you, without being tethered to a paycheck or the expectations of others.
You know, it's funny you mention that because it makes me think of my dad. He was an ER doctor. And you'd think with that kind of career, he'd be working well into his 60s. But he was always incredibly frugal, always focused on saving and investing. And he actually ended up retiring early in his mid-50s.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. He's living his best life now, traveling and spending time with family. But what's really interesting is that some of his colleagues who were earning just as much, if not more, they're completely burnt out and they can't afford to retire because they haven't been as mindful about their finances.
It's a perfect example of how your mindset and your relationship with money can have a huge impact on your life.
Absolutely. And Housel really emphasizes that point in the book. He says that understanding your own financial psychology is crucial because it's often those unconscious beliefs and emotional triggers that sabotage our financial well-being.
Yeah, and in the podcast with Stephen Bartlett, Bartlett actually shares a really personal story about this. He talks about how when he was broke, he used to gamble away his student loan. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? But it wasn't until he found financial stability that his mindset shifted, and he became much more focused on long-term thinking and responsible spending.
I think we've all made those impulsive financial decisions at some point.
Right.
Where we look back and we're like, what was I thinking? It's like there's this emotional part of our brain that just takes over sometimes.
Absolutely. And Housel actually talks about this. He says that we all have this deep-seated human desire for respect and admiration. And that can play out in really interesting ways when it comes to personal finance.
How so?
Well, he suggests that we seek respect either through inner qualities, things like wisdom, kindness, a great sense of humor, or through material possessions.
So if you feel like you're lacking in those inner qualities or like they're not being recognized, then the allure of material wealth becomes that much stronger.
Exactly. It's like you're trying to compensate for something.
Yeah.
And you end up chasing external validation instead of focusing on building true wealth.
So you're saying that someone who feels unseen or undervalued might be more drawn to flashy displays of wealth or even something like a lottery ticket.
Exactly. It's a shot at gaining that respect and admiration they might be craving, even if it's through a statistically improbable avenue like the lottery.
It's like they're hoping to buy their way into feeling good about themselves. But as we've been talking about, true wealth is about so much more than that.
It's about building that financial independence and that sense of security that allows you to live life on your own terms.
And that's where Housel's emphasis on endurance and patience comes in, right?
Right. He uses Warren Buffett as a prime example.
Sure.
Did you know that Buffett accumulated something like 99% of his wealth after he turned 60?
Seriously.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it wasn't about some secret formula or risky bets. It was his ability to stay the course, to think long term, and to let the power of compounding work its magic.
It's amazing how much wealth can be built just by being consistent over time.
Absolutely. And he also highlights the story of Ronald Reed. He was a janitor who quietly amassed an $8 million fortune by consistently investing in index funds for decades.
Wow, I love those stories. It shows you that you don't need to be a Wall Street whiz kid to build wealth. So for someone just starting out, what would be a practical way to apply these principles of endurance and patience?
Well, Housel recommends a strategy called dollar cost averaging into index funds.
Okay, break that down for me.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You invest a fixed amount of money at regular intervals, say monthly, regardless of what the market is doing.
So even if the market is down, you keep investing consistently.
Exactly. That's the key. It can feel counterintuitive, but it actually works in your favor by investing consistently. You average out your purchase price over time, reducing the impact of market volatility.
And index funds are a good way to do this because,
Yeah, because they offer you a diversified slice of the entire stock market, all in one easy, low-cost package.
so you're not trying to pick individual stocks or time the market. It's a long game, right?
Well, exactly. You're in it for the long haul.
But let's be honest, investing for the future can feel pretty abstract. When you're dealing with the day-to-day realities of bills and expenses,
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there.
how does Housel address that?
Well, he talks about this concept of preparedness over prediction.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, so instead of trying to predict the unpredictable, like a global pandemic or a sudden job loss, he says we should focus on building a financial buffer that can absorb those shocks.
So having an emergency fund and things like that.
Exactly. He even suggests holding what feels like too much cash.
Too much cash.
Yeah.
But isn't that going against the whole idea of investing and growing your money?
That's a common misconception. But Housel argues that having a sizable cash cushion actually reduces anxiety and allows you to capitalize on opportunities when they arise.
So it's about having that flexibility to weather the storms and make strategic moves when the time is right.
Exactly. It's about being prepared for whatever life throws your way.
I like that it's a much more proactive approach.
And you know what? His own investment strategy, he admits, is surprisingly simple.
What is it?
Cash, a house, and index funds.
Really? That's it.
That's it. He believes in keeping things simple and focusing on the fundamentals.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it.
Right. It's about building a solid foundation and not getting distracted by all the noise.
So we've talked about the importance of understanding your financial psychology, building that financial buffer, and embracing endurance and patience as key principles for building wealth. But there's so much more to unpack, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue our deep dive into Morgan Housel's insights on the psychology of money.
It's like we get so focused on what we can control in our finances, budgeting, saving, investing, that we forget about those big, unpredictable events, like a global pandemic or a market crash, the things that can really throw a wrench in our plans.
Yeah, it's like that saying, expect the unexpected. How do you really prepare for the unknown?
Well, that's where Housel's concept of preparedness over prediction comes in.
We talked about that a bit earlier. Right.
Instead of trying to predict every possible scenario, which is impossible, by the way. We should focus on building that financial buffer, that margin of safety that can help us absorb those unexpected shocks.
So holding what feels like too much cash, as he suggests, it's really about giving you that flexibility to adapt.
Exactly. It's about having the resources to not only weather the storms,
Right.
but also to capitalize on opportunities when they arise.
Like being able to buy low when everyone else is panicking and selling.
Exactly. It's about having that dry powder ready to go.
It's almost like viewing cash as a strategic asset.
Right. It's not just something sitting idly by. It's a tool that can give you a real edge.
I like that it's just your perspective on cash.
And this ties into another interesting concept Housel talks about, the concept of tails.
Tails.
Yeah.
Like the things animals have.
Not quite, haha. He's talking about those rare events that have an outsized impact on the overall outcome.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow.
So think about venture capital, for example. A small number of successful investments often drive the majority of the returns for the entire fund.
Ah, I see. So it's like a few big wins can make up for a lot of smaller losses.
Exactly. Or consider a career path. Sometimes a single decision, a chance encounter, can completely change your trajectory.
So you're saying that while it's important to have a solid financial plan,
Right.
we should also be open to those unexpected opportunities that could have a disproportionate impact on our lives.
That's it. It's about recognizing that sometimes the biggest rewards come from those moments of uncertainty.
When you step outside your comfort zone and take a chance.
Exactly. It's not always about playing it safe.
That reminds me of my decision to leave my corporate job and start my own business. It was a huge risk, but it was also a tail event that completely changed my life.
That's awesome. And that's what I find so empowering about House's message. He encourages us to embrace the uncertainty, to be open to those tail events that could redefine our success.
It's about finding that balance between planning and serendipity.
Right, because sometimes the best opportunities come when you least expect them.
But let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. For those of us who aren't venture capitalists or entrepreneurs taking big risks, how does this concept of tails apply to our everyday financial decisions?
What could be as simple as deciding to invest in your education, even if it means taking on some debt.
Or maybe taking a chance on a side hustle that could turn into a full-time business?
Exactly. It's about being aware that small decisions can sometimes have a ripple effect. That leads to much larger outcomes.
So it's not just about making those big, bold moves. It's also about being mindful of the potential impact of even seemingly small decisions.
Precisely. And this ties into another key concept Housel emphasizes, understanding your time horizon.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
Well, different goals have different time frames, right?
No.
If you're saving for retirement decades in the future, you can afford to take on more risk because you have time to recover from market fluctuations.
But if you're saving for a down payment on a house in the next few years, you'll need a more conservative approach.
Exactly. It's about aligning your financial strategies with your time horizons.
That makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of the market or the latest investment trend. But we need to keep our individual goals and timelines in mind.
Absolutely. And this leads to a really fascinating observation Housel makes about the skills required to make money versus the skills required to keep it.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more.
So making money often involves taking risks, being optimistic, swinging for the fences.
But keeping money requires a different mindset.
Right. It's about being more conservative, recognizing the fragility of wealth, and preparing for those inevitable downturns.
So it's almost like you need two different personalities.
Yeah, in a way, it's about finding that balance between ambition and prudence.
Between taking calculated risks and protecting what you've earned.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance.
You know, it makes me think of that quote by Nassim Taleb, the author of The Black Swan. He said, wealth is not about having a lot of money. It's about having a lot of options.
I love that quote.
It's about having that financial security that gives you choices.
And that's where Housel's insights on financial psychology are so valuable. He helps us develop a more balanced perspective on wealth creation. It's not just about chasing returns. It's also about preserving capital and managing risk wisely.
It's about building that financial foundation that can withstand the storms.
Exactly. And, for many of us, the goalpost keeps moving. We reach a certain level of wealth, and then we immediately set our sights on the next milestone.
It's like that never-ending pursuit of more.
Right, and Housel actually addresses this directly. He says the hardest financial skill to master is getting the goalpost to stop moving.
Because we often fall into the trap of thinking that once we reach a certain level of wealth, all our problems will vanish.
Right, but as we've been discussing, happiness and fulfillment aren't solely determined by our net worth.
It's about finding that balance between ambition and contentment.
And recognizing when we have enough.
But how do you define enough?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It seems so subjective.
It is, but Housel borrows another great analogy from Nassim Taleb.
Let's hear it.
Taleb says, you are wealthy when the money that you deny tastes better than the money you accept.
I've never heard that before.
It's about reaching a point where you're no longer driven by that insatiable hunger for more, where you find satisfaction in what you have and the life you've built.
So it's not about denying yourself pleasure or living an austere life. It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance.
Exactly. It's about appreciating the richness of your experiences, your relationships, your personal growth, not just your material possessions.
You know, it's funny. We talk about all these complex strategies for building wealth. But sometimes it feels like the simplest things are the hardest to master.
Oh, absolutely. Like just figuring out what truly matters to you and aligning your financial decisions with those values.
Exactly. Or like Housel talks about getting the goalpost to stop moving. It's
Mhm.
so easy to get caught up in that constant chase for more.
It's like we always think just a little bit more and then I'll be happy, but it's never really enough, is it?
It's like that hamster wheel. You just keep running and running, but you never actually get anywhere.
And I think that's where Housel's message is so refreshing. He reminds us that true wealth isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you live your life.
It's about finding that sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Exactly. And that can look different for everyone.
You know, for some people, it might be about spending more time with their families. For others, it might be about pursuing a passion or giving back to their community.
It's about figuring out what makes you pick and using your resources to support that.
And I think that's a really empowering message.
Yeah, because it takes the focus off of just accumulating wealth and puts it back on what really matters, living a meaningful life.
And Housel doesn't shy away from the fact that life isn't always easy.
Oh no, he's very real about that.
He acknowledges that there will be ups and downs, unexpected challenges, and maybe even a few financial oh crap moments along the way.
But he encourages us to embrace that uncertainty, to view those challenges as opportunities for growth.
To build that resilience and bounce back even stronger.
In the podcast, he actually shares a really personal story about this.
How about that?
He talks about how he struggled with mild depression and anxiety for a while. And he wishes he could go back and tell his younger self that everything would be okay.
I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling.
Yeah, we spend so much time worrying about things that might never happen.
Or things that are beyond our control.
And just steals our joy and prevents us from living in the present moment.
So what's the takeaway here?
I think it's about finding that balance between being prepared for the future and not letting worry consume us.
It's about recognizing that life is a journey.
And that there will be bumps along the road.
But it's how we navigate those bumps that really defined us.
It's about learning from our mistakes, growing from our experiences, and ultimately using those experiences to create a richer, more fulfilling life.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the psychology of money. We've covered a lot of ground today. But I think the key takeaway is that building wealth is about so much more than just the numbers.
Absolutely. It's about understanding yourself, your values, your goals.
Yeah.
And making conscious choices that align with those things.
It's about finding that balance between ambition and contentment, between taking calculated risks and protecting what you've earned.
And ultimately, it's about using your resources to create a life that is both prosperous and meaningful.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for listening.
Got it.
If you're ready to take action, click the link in the description below to access my free resource archive and get the tools you need to start building wealth today. Don't miss out. Your next big step is just one click away.